if Navy SEALs was a video team, how they would act. So if you gather the best of the best, how effective does that allow you to be in order to save budget from other verticals that you would waste budget at, and instead take that budget and put in the creative's pocket, empowering them to act as the best version of themselves and reflect that work back to the client.
Welcome to Careers Unwrapped, the podcast created to help you build and accelerate your own career. And in this episode, we're focused on the world of storytelling, of video production, creativity, brand building and partnerships, all through the eyes and experiences of John Mouratis. Now, John is a visionary, I think, in the video and production industry. He's the founder of Storyflow Entertainment. He's got a really rich background in creating compelling content for leading brands like Google, Nike, Vogue, and Ralph Lauren. Now, at Careers Unwrapped, we delve into real-life career experiences from successful people who've been through the ups and downs, the wins and the fails, all to give you, hopefully, raw, actionable advice to help you get ahead. I'm your host, Mark Fawcett, and John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's probably my second ever podcast, so yes, I really look forward to it.
Well, one of the things we try and do to kick this off is what we call a career confession. So something that maybe you haven't told a lot of people. And one thing I've probably asked then to begin with is maybe a time when you've seriously bluffed your way out of a situation where you messed up, wherever you once in your life had to really cover up a mistake.
Yes, so I think when I first started Storyflow, I am all about trustworthiness. So prior to Storyflow, I was freelancing quite a lot with other production companies. So I didn't really want to use that portfolio because it didn't belong under their company name. So when we first started, I was like, okay, cool, we need to build our own portfolio. So in order to do that, I'm not a salesman by education, I am currently by profession because I run a business, but not a great one. So yes, basically we had to under budget a lot of our projects, which, to be honest with you, kind of bite back at the end of the day. I had to spend a lot of my personal savings, which is how I got out of situations displaced. And that's a lesson I took very early on, probably through the first 3-4 months. And yeah, I tried to not make it ever since. It has happened a couple of times, but try to avoid as much as possible.
Yeah, I definitely had that occasionally in the earlier days of my career when a potential client would ask what the price would be, and you're desperate for the work. So you try and give them a really low price, and then you end up realizing, actually, I can't do the work at all for that price. So you learn as you go forward, don't you? Well, let's bring it back to what you do now. Now, I've noticed when you've been writing about video production, you talk about the difference between what's cool and what works. How do you define that difference, and how do you find that point?
So COVID and the years that followed that kind of revolutionized the power of creativity and the power of storytelling within the whole brand business world, and us to be able to make a lot of profit and gain a lot of awareness through simple, low production value videos like UGC videos on TikTok and stuff like that. And in general, there was that phrase of everyone, because we have many young Gen Z marketeers coming into play and everything, everyone is about think outside the box, think outside the box, think outside the box. And it's like people don't even know first what's inside the box. And that's something that I always think about. It's like what's inside the box probably has been there for a long time because they're just for zero reasons. So how do we bridge the gap between what's outside the box, what's different, what's distinctive and people will pay attention to, and to what's inside the box, which is like, what are the rules, what are the guidelines, what the history shows of what works? How do we connect those two elements to achieve the certain business objectives that a business wants to achieve?
And in your current work, you also talk about gathering the best video team together and paying them the most. Now, there are lots of people who say they would work in this area. They could be content makers, they could be influencers, they could be film producers. How do you stand out? How do you put yourself across as the best of the best?
Yes. So first of all, obviously the best is something subjective. Obviously there are awards, but it's creative industry. There is a lot of personal taste into it because I try to treat as much as sports as possible. I'm coming from a rich sports background. I love playing sports as a kid. I love the competitive side of it. but there is not that direct competition. The thing that I did when I started the company, I feel like in my head, agencies are a very selfish business model. I started the agency, I tried because I want to save the world and be impactful. Don't get me wrong, there is impact in the work that we do, but now I realize that I started the agency only because I want to run a business and be able to label myself as an entrepreneur. Further down that line, I realized how many video production companies exist out there. It's a very sexy career for young people. So, along with the entrepreneur title, so there are many young people who create video production companies. And don't get me wrong, it's a great space, a space that's growing, but a space that I believe the supply grows faster than the demand. So it seems a bit crowded and a bit oversaturated. The industry in itself and agencies, I find, are very client focused, extremely client focused. Whatever the client says, it goes. So my thinking was like, okay, cool. How can we provide something different? Don't get me wrong. That was not when I started. That was 1 year in when I realized what's happening inside my head and I came across the reality. So how can we provide something different? And my realization came across the fact that what if instead of caring about the client and many times taking advantage and messing up creatives throughout the process, and we start caring about the creatives and we start serving creatives. And by serving creatives and provide them the ground they can play at and be comfortable with in order to live out of their passion, then that probably might reflect back to the client and the work we provide them. It's still a work in progress. Still, I have good data at the point, but I'm not fully convinced. What I did want to say and what I hate the most personally is when I see companies try to convince creatives to do a lower paid job than what they deserve by giving excuses as it's a great project, you will get great exposure and stuff like that. And when I look at it as an outsider, what happens is basically we take advantage of a person who is passionate about their work and we justify paying them lower than they should get paid just because they love the work they do and they'd really be willing to make a living out of it. So basically what I did is at the end of the day, we need what we do to make sense budget-wise for the brands. We cannot just charge a ridiculous amount of money and expect brands to pay to us when the competition charges half as much. And the reason we gather the best is if Navy SEALs was a video team, how they would act. So if you gather the best of the best, how effective does that allow you to be in order to save budget from other verticals that you would waste budget at, and instead take that budget and put in the creative's pocket, empowering them to act as the best version of themselves and reflect that work back to the client. And it's a model that we run with.
And so when you're dealing with clients, and as I said in the introduction, you've worked with some very well-known high-end global brands. How are you convincing them that it's worth spending more on the video production content than maybe they were expecting? How do you demonstrate to them that that's going to get them a better result?
The way we split the budget is happening on our side. On the client side, we don't really break it down like that. So basically, on the client, what we do is like the final budget we charge is comparatively very similar to budget that other high-end production companies would charge them for. It's just the way we split our budget. Most of the times, most companies require us to send them a very detailed budget as our work is production work. It's not an agency work. So the way we broke the budget, when they see and they go line across the line, it's just the fees of each creative, it's much higher. And we don't spend money on things that other companies might budget for. So the final figure is very similar. It's just the breakdown of it is different. The way we reason that is just by the social proof and the results that it brings slower and slow.
And I'm fascinated then by the creative process in that when a client provides you with a brief, what are the steps that you take with your experience that helps you turn a brief into a fantastic film, into a really compelling piece of content? How do you go through that process?
Yes, that's a great question, first of all. And before I answer it, I want to touch a little bit on the brief because the brief can be very different. Sometimes it's a very blank brief and it's like, guys, we want to emphasize this part of our brand, this part of our product. What can you come up with? And sometimes it's a very detailed brief where it's like they just want to give us a creative spin on it and produce it. But to be honest with you, it's like a ready to go concept. So depending on the side, usually the way we work inside is very similar to how most other production companies or agencies would work. but for people who don't know, we have like basically a roster of creative directors who are specialized within specific either verticals. Verticals might be sports, food and drink, healthcare, or other industries, or it can be techniques and aesthetics of the way you tell a film. So it might be comedy, it might be surrealism, it might be very cinematic and story driven. It depends. Like each creative director has their own vertical. And in fact, if you're aspiring to be a creative director, try to find your vertical early on. It's very helpful for companies to be able to pitch you in projects. So once we find the right creative director, basically we allow them to come up with a pitch and bring it together. And then that goes through a designer and through a visual researcher who is going to help them gather all the references and put their deck together. And then finally, they come across and they talk with the executive producer, which sometimes might be, sometimes if we have multiple projects, going to be freelancers we hire. And just to make sure that everything makes sense logistic-wise before we present it to the brand in itself.
And what's your involved in the story process from beginning to end? Where's the area that you find you add the greatest value and you most enjoy getting stuck into?
Great question. So before I started the company, I was and still am a producer. I love the production part and the logistics of it. As I grow in the industry, I start realizing that my biggest strength is building teams and finding the right people. So I think naturally, as the company grows bigger and as we have more resources, I will just focus on building Storyflow in itself and getting known for what I want to be known for, and just focus on gathering the right people and let them do their work, basically.
And do you find personally that you get a conflict between the passion of the creative process from the practical challenges of business building? Because the more time you spend on your business, surely the less time you can spend being creative.
Yes. So that's something that I have come to realization like the last 2-3 months, basically. But I was part of a retreat of a community I'm part of. And there was this question to everyone from 1 to 10, how creative do you feel? And my answer was 3 as a person. There is that concept, which is, are you an editor or a writer? If I see a blank canvas, I have no idea what to do. I'm not a writer. I cannot come up with a concept. I can see a first draft of a video. So I'm more towards an editor than a writer. And although editor is still a creative role, I don't consider myself extremely creative. And I find business building that can be a very creative process because you can build a business in so many ways. So that's the part of creativity I like to explore now as an individual and I find a huge interest in.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because creativity can mean so many different things to so many people. In this context, obviously, you've spoken about creative directors coming up with concepts and original ideas, the writers, for example. But there's creativity and storytelling about how you get a message across. Now, it's interesting you said earlier, you're not a sales person, but surely in your role, you're selling all of the time, both to clients, but also to creatives, to directors and producers. You're selling the concept of your business to them.
Yeah, I do. I said like I have developed naturally to a salesperson. I just said that I'm not sure if I would describe myself as a great one. But yeah, I do. Like for the beginning of, that's also another lesson I took as an entrepreneur. From the beginning of the business, I tried to shy away from it. There is that myth, I would say, that goes on social media because I'm very big also on building my personal brand, especially LinkedIn, for people just getting inbound leads and just telling their story and the clients will come to them. And it's something that I was like, oh, that's fascinating. You never have to sell. You never have to expose yourself to rejection. That's wonderful. And then I realized that, no, that's not how you build a business. So now I am a seller, yes.
Yeah, I think we have to be. We're all selling something, whether we're working in business and therefore we have customers, whether you're a politician and you're selling an idea, whether you're a scientist and you're selling something that you want others to do in terms of behavior. We're all having to sell something. And you mentioned there about personal brand building. This is an area I'm very interested in. And let's perhaps consider somebody who's maybe just starting in this area. They're just thinking, actually, I do have talents. I have been working at content production. I want to actually make a career out of it. What should they be thinking about from a personal brand building perspective? What should they be considering and planning and doing?
Oh, I'm entering a very dangerous territory right now because there are so many personal branding experts out there who will come after me. Interesting. I'll try to answer for myself if I would rebuild it, what I would do different based on what I did. So I think I would start a bit more strategically. It's very difficult to say, and it's a very common word to be used, strategy and storytelling nowadays. But I feel like you need to know why you are on the platform, what you want to achieve, and who do you want to talk to. Once you know those three things and you're feeling good with them, it's not only that you have answered them in a paper just to move on and have it as a task of the to-do list, you actually feel good with them. Then the biggest problem when you start creating content is stopping. Start and stopping, start and stopping, start and stopping. And the reason people do that is because of fear of rejection, of self-doubt, of how they will come across, basically of what other people will think. And it's something that you have to fight against in social media. I still fight against it. Not that I'm a big creator, but I create content for years and I still fight against it. But as long as you have answered those three questions, what you're afraid of is outside of your three answers, of what your three answers combine, doesn't matter. You can battle your emotional feelings with the rational answer and you can move forward and keep going. And if it's actually inside the circle of what your three answers combine, then it's very viable, it's very insightful, and we should reconsider and we should rethink. So I think like just answering these three questions give you some direction, which is very helpful because in social media you can get very lost because every person has their own advice based on how they achieved what they achieved.
So what else would you do differently from when you started out? With the benefit of hindsight, going back and advising 18-year-old John, what would you say, do this differently from the route you've taken so far?
Great. So I'm 27 now. When I was 18, I had good grades at school and I went to do my master's at electrical and computer engineering. Why? Because my father did it and because my brother did it. And I did it because I didn't know what else to want to do with my life, which is fine. It's okay. It happens. Like you're 18, you're not supposed to know. It was a 5 year degree. I dropped out of college the fifth year. Like I spent 5 years on it in the fifth year. Yes. Basically, I had to move to UK because of Brexit. So I had to make a decision. So I dropped out on the final year. And I think although in these 5 years, I had a great time. I went out a lot and I fulfilled that part of myself where now I don't need it. Like if my friends ask me to go out and I want to stay inside and create something, I've spent so much time going out and having fun by the traditional way that I don't really miss it. So I can stay inside and work. So there are all these different pots and cups that you have to fill in your life. Sometimes you fill them all equally throughout your life. And that might be the healthiest way. I'm not sure. But basically, I overfilled one and then I moved on to the other because I was very sad when I realized that all the others were empty. And yeah, that's how I did it. And I think it wasn't the healthiest way because for the amount of fun and everything I had, I reached a point where I realized that my friends, my close people are moving forward. I have nothing to show for it. I went through a 6-month depression period. And then when I was like, okay, cool, we need to do something. We need to move on with our lives. And then I realized that I love video. And I was like, okay, cool, where can I do it that it will make a sensible career for me? And London was a great answer because in Greece, it's a very small industry and it works mainly with nepotism. And mainly if you are in Athens, because that's where like 9% of the industry is. And yeah, I didn't have that. So I moved to London and it went from there. But I could have saved myself 2-3 years.
And you've mentioned leveraging AI and other technologies at Storyflow. So can you expand a bit upon how you are using new technologies in the creative and the production processes?
Yes. So first of all, as I said, I come from a tech background and I love technology. I believe in it so much. And it's something that I often feel that creativity don't embrace very early on because they are not really used to technology and technological advancements and mainly how inevitable they are. The fact that no matter how much you fight back, it will happen. So you better get on the wave and try to ride it instead of just get drowned by it. So the way we use it at the moment is we mostly use it. There is a pre-production phase, the production phase, which helps with, especially the generative part, which helps like with us about scripts, about voiceover, about test films, which is something that we create in order to show to the clients how an asset might look like, about visual researching and references we want to put within our decks when we cannot find online stuff that we really like. And we use it a bit, but not a lot because It's not really there yet, but we used a bit on the post-production phase as well, mainly on the sound element and less on the visual, because the sound is less complex. So AI has managed to make a faster progression there than the visual element, which is the progression again is unreal, but it's much more complex. So it will take some time for it to catch up with human-made art.
So you use it more to save time than to necessarily replace creative thinking and creative delivery. It's about making it an easier, faster, and therefore cheaper process.
I would say that we use it for the creative part, definitely not to replace creative thinking. That's something that I really, really value. But we use it in order to visualize creative ideas for people to communicate. Me and you, if we talk about something, we visualize it slightly different, sometimes very different. So we need references in order to be able to bridge the gap between what you're thinking and what I'm thinking. And sometimes those references are either, yes, as you say, are either very hard to find online. They might exist, are very hard to find. So you save time. But sometimes they don't even exist. So you basically save, like, you add to the creative process. But yeah, like ultimately what you do is we would end to that point either way. So what you do is like you save time and money. Yes, you're right on that.
Now, let's just think about some career starters, people who are getting going. Perhaps they're 6, 7, 8 years behind you at the moment, leaving school or college, age 19. They've been involved in making some content. They're making some good, high quality social media content, TikTok and others. If they really want to actually make it as a career, from your own experience, from the successes and the fails, the ups and downs, what are the pieces of advice you would give to somebody starting out, wanting to make a video career, wanting to make a production career? What should they be doing and what should they not be doing?
Great question. They should try. First of all, you should try. You should try and get your hands into everything possible you can. And that will allow you to understand, okay, what I like, what I don't like. You have to decide if you're a specialist or a generalist. For example, a videographer is a generalist. Yes, they specialize in video, but in the terms of video production world, they go, they film, they edit. Sometimes they are a one-man band. They might have an assistant, and they make videos for small businesses, sometimes even big businesses, but they're small, lower quality assets. They can work full-time. They can work as a freelancer. They can start their own small video production company, but they will never create the highest quality assets in terms of like production value because they don't have the resources. They are a one-man person who knows sometimes even a lot about everything. If you aspire to create the most special videos you can possibly imagine, you have to be a specialist. You have to belong as a part of a team, as part of a crew, and you have to find your role within that. There are different departments, obviously, but you will grow within your career to know one thing. And when I say one thing, not one task, I mean one job, and do it as good humanly as possible. That's something that you can decide when you're 18, but ideally you want to try different stuff because you don't want to spend 10 years in a career path and then decide that. Although there is nothing wrong with it, but it will just be more difficult for you. The other thing I would say is, fortunately or unfortunately, there are many young people who come in senior positions in the creative industry because we have young generation, Gen Z, young millennials have grown up with the creative arts in terms of media, YouTube and everything. So it's much more engraved into their being. So they're very good at it. And you see people mid-20s, late 20s being in very senior positions where they're able to hire other people. They value working more with people in their early 20s than people close to their age or older than them. So that means that from a very young age, sometimes even 16, but from 18, 19, 20, you can find a place in the industry and you can learn by people who know it well while doing it and making a decent living out of it. So it might be because I don't come from that background, I can understand it. But honestly, even if you want to do a degree, which might be amazing, I have no experience with universities in the UK, so I don't want to talk about that. But you can still start working, you can still start networking, making connections, sending people messages. Even if they don't reply to you, you can send them a message every 3, 4, 5 months. Like after 5 messages, they will get back to you. So when you enter a world and you're like 22, you can still have some stuff to show on your CV apart from just a degree. Because again, fortunately or unfortunately, we don't really value a degree in our industry. If you see my CV before I create the company, it's just credits of the projects I have been on. It says nothing else about me. It's just the projects I have done, the role that I had. That was it.
And if they were to approach you within Storyflow, you talk about bringing A+ talent together. And you said, if Navy SEALs was a video team, that would be you. So if I think I'm good and I'm approaching you, what are you looking for? What are you using to judge whether I'm the sort of person you should get into one of your video teams?
Yes. So first of all, it depends on your role. When I say an A-rated team, it means based on your role. I want people who are the best possible within what they do on that role. Now, the easiest way for me to do it, the way we do it, because we're still a very small company, so it's like we don't have huge amounts of projects because we're very bespoke on the projects we do as well, is recommendations. That's the way I work. It's like I ask people who I know and I trust their opinion, and they recommend me people who they know, and that's how it works. But whenever I work with new people, it's because of two reasons. Either because I go to their profile and I see, like, that might be LinkedIn profile, that might be Instagram profile, it's a social media profile, and I see that it's all about their work in a way, and I can see what they have done, or even done anything yet. I can see what they're passionate about, and we can talk about passion projects as well in a bit because it's very important in our industry. Or it's because someone has fought in order to get my attention. As I said before, like they have messaged me 5 times in the span of 12 months. And as a reciprocation, when I see it the 6th time, because I'm not a bad person and I would love to reply to everyone, it's just I focus my time on something else. I'm like, I feel bad for ghosting that person 6 times. I mean, because when a client does that to me, I hate it. So I will go back to them. So it's one of the two ways. What I would also say, and I can mainly provide that by later on, I can give some links to people. Our industry is a very last minute industry because the production industry. What that means? It means that the client asks something 2 days before the shoot, and now suddenly the producer has to find 3 more people to help on set. And because they're stressing, they cannot really think who they know. They might know someone already, but they cannot really think. What happens after that is there are some profiles, mainly on Instagram and Facebook, who take that job and they repost it. And it's just that. Their profiles is just that. And I can give you a handle later on. They just repost stories from other people in the industry. And then I started in London when I first came. I was waking up 7 a.m. because some people might even need people the same day, the same morning, because someone was ill or someone pulled out or something like that. Everyone who doesn't have a work on that day sleeps at 7 a.m. So I would open that 7 a.m. and I would be like, can you be there in an hour? Yes, I will be there in an hour. Yeah, absolutely. So I would save them. And then as a reciprocation, if I would do the good work, they would take me on the next project, for example, just to pay it back. Because in the creative industry, what I have come across, there are extremely good people. People are very good, honestly. They're very positive. So yeah, that would be my advice.
I think that's fascinating because it's not just very relevant to your area of work, to film and video production, that it's so important pretty much everywhere is people who can just get it done. So whether you're getting up and saying, I can be in there in an hour, because I got up early and I saw the required date, and you are there in an hour and you turn up on time, you just do those real basics. The more competitive the environment you're in, the more that matters. And I think, John, it's been a fascinating conversation because we've covered so many different areas in the short time we've had together. And I love the line that you used, that if Navy SEALs was a video team, then that would be us, because it's going to stick in people's minds. And you've spoken about how you as a producer very much see yourself as somebody who builds teams. You've spoken about the importance of personal brand building, of knowing what you want to achieve, what you want to say, and who you want to talk to, who you want to say that to. And I think that's really important. And then for anybody starting out or wanting to start out in this area overall, what you've said to them about trying everything. So actually go and do things, try it, make content, work on production. Consider whether you're a specialist or a generalist. Find any work you can do and take part in it, whether that's the runner starter piece. But the more you're building your profile, the more you're networking, the more you're then asking people for recommendations from every job that you've done, the more that you're going to then actually, when you are fighting to get attention, the more that people are going to be more likely to see that. But also, as you said, on the 6th message, when you go and have a look at what they've done and you see there a body of work but also a set of recommendations against that work, you're going to feel, actually, let's give this person a chance and take it from there. So, John, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for unwrapping career. There's so much more we could cover, but for anyone looking into this area of work, I think that there's some really important lessons within there. And also, if you're going to contact John directly, it may take up to 6 times, but he will try to respond. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mark. I want to say a massive apology to anyone who I haven't got back to the reply. Even if it's the first time, I'm really sorry. I'm terrible with my messages. Mark, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Keep persevering. I think that's the truth. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by We Are Futures. To find out more about We Are Futures and how we can introduce your brand, business, or organization to the mass markets of tomorrow, visit www.wearefutures.com. Make sure to search for Careers Unwrapped in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Remember to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at We Are Futures, thanks for listening.